Today, I'm joined by Jonathan Davies, who is the under-19 coach at Slavia Prague. First of all, Jonathan, thanks for joining us. How are you enjoying life and coaching in the Czech Republic?
Yeah, it's certainly a challenge, but we're well this season, and yeah, it's different, much different to the UK, but I think it's really good. It's going really well.
So obviously you're coaching in the Czech Republic now, but just to go back, Jonathan, what are your sort of earliest football memories?
So I'm from Stoke, Stoke-on-Trent. So unfortunately, at the moment, I'm a Stoke City fan, long-suffering Stoke City fan, and yeah, I remember my first game. I think it was 1994. So I went to watch. I think it was Stoke Wolves at the old Victoria grounds, which I think when it was knocked down, I think it was maybe the oldest football ground, I think, in the UK or maybe in the world. I can't remember. But yeah, very historical place. And I used to go there with my dad occasionally. My dad was actually a Port Vale fan. So that was quite interesting. He used to take us to watch Stoke and Port Vale. My brother, who's a little bit younger than me, like 18 months younger, and he used to come with us occasionally. We used to go and watch the Vale, and he's a Vale fan as well. So I'm outnumbered. I was outnumbered in my family growing up, and I was the black sheep, if you like, that I chose Stoke City. I remember at the time as well, I think we were in the third tier, and Port Vale were in the second tier. So it was a bit of a gamble, but despite how poorly the last 8 years have been for Stoke, we're still above the Vale, so I still feel like I chose the right option. So.
Absolutely. Now, to go on to your coaching journey, it actually began with teaching. You trained to become a teacher, and then you moved to China for experience in the classroom, and then Taiwan. What was it like to move so far away and, that different culture?
Yes, I mean, I graduated, I think it was 2010, which is, it's ancient history these days. It's flown by. And yeah, I graduated with a PGCE in 2010 I remember I graduated and there was that whole issue of, you need experience, but no one's willing to give you experience. I was like 23 years old, just graduated and I couldn't find a job in the UK. So I decided to put my CV on English teachers abroad or something, like teaching ESL, basically in another country. I'd always wanted to travel. I'd actually been to South Africa in the June of that year for the World Cup. So that kind of fired up my traveling juices, let's say. And then, I put my CV on the website, and within 24 hours, I had a call from Korea, a company in Korea who had just opened a new school in China. And they'd offered me a teaching position. I thought, well, my choices were either I go back to Stoke and live with my family, live with my parents, or, I take the plunge and I just go for it. And I remember calling my parents, and my mum was in, her son going to China, and my dad said, why are you talking to us? You should just go. That was my dad's personality. So he gave me a bit of a kick up the backside, and he said, this is a really big opportunity for you. So you should definitely, grab it, go for it. So I did. And then within a week, I'd gone on to London, got a visa and gone through all the process. And within a week of accepting the job, I'd landed in China, and no smartphone, didn't really know anything about China at that stage, couldn't speak the language. Apart from a quick Google search, maybe in the airport, I didn't really have any idea what was ahead of me. But it was really exciting. Obviously, when you're 23, just graduated, and it's a big adventure, isn't it? So I was working out there for three years in China teaching.
Yeah, and then when you moved to Taiwan to teach, that's when the opportunity to coach football came along?
Yeah, so actually it was my third year in China. I met a girl, a Taiwanese, who she came over to China to visit me for the summer. We spent the summer together, and then yeah, we decided that we were going to move to Taiwan. And when I moved, she recommended that there was like a British bar in Taipei where I ended up living, and the owner, I was drinking with the owner one night. I think it might have been my first or second night in Taipei, and you know, we were talking about, you know, what I was going to do there and what my plans were and why I was there. And I said, you know, football coaching was one of my dreams, you know, dream jobs. And yeah, he said, well, my friend owns like the academy on the island, so you know, I can put you in touch. And so I did. So I woke up hungover the next day, obviously, and I sent a message to this owner of the academy, and yeah, he invited me in for a trial the next week. I was working as a teacher Monday to Friday, and then at the weekends I was out on the pitch, you know, coaching and getting some experience of that. So yeah, happened very quickly, but I'm really happy it did.
Yeah. And you know, this was a multinational football team, and you also had the opportunity then to work alongside UEFA coaches. So it seems like it was this experience that sort of put you on that path to the dream job.
Yeah, I think that was really, you know, as I said, I walked onto the pitch the first time, and you know, like I don't know if you know much about football in Taiwan, but it doesn't really exist in terms of professional football, and so, you know, we were doing a big part of the business model was based on kindergarten, you know, doing sports classes in kindergarten. So, you know, really young kids, just getting them active, getting them running around a little bit. So there wasn't really that much in the way of football, actually. And then of course, you know, we did a little bit more, let's say, serious coaching. So we were hired out to the American school, like the international schools, and we did their after school football programs. We did the afternoon, we did like a select training session. So we would bring, you know, the best under 12s, under 11s, under 13s that we could find in the city. My responsibility was with I think it was under 12s, under 13s at the time, that I would coach the select on a Saturday afternoon, and that was really the main time I got to actually coach real football. So planning training, proper training sessions, working on technical details, and really like honing football coaching skills. Otherwise, it was literally just playing around with kindergarten kids, and you know, just getting games with them and getting them kicking the ball and running, and yeah. So yeah, that was like really the beginning of the journey.
Yeah, and then in 2017 you moved to the Czech Republic. So how does a role with a club the size of Slavia Prague come about?
I thought to myself, well, I've been here 4 years, you know, got a lot of experience on the grass, but I've always wanted to be a professional football coach. You know, I wanted to try to make it. So I thought, well, if I stay in Taiwan, I could have a really good life here. But, you know, there's always that nagging feeling in the back of your head, isn't there? Of like, what if I'd tried it? What if I'd, you know, taken that risk? And so I decided to do it. So I contacted a lot of different clubs and academies around. And then the one real positive response I got from a guy who's got a football academy in Prague. Some of my friends in Taipei had actually been to Prague, and I think one of them had actually lived here, and he said, look, it's an amazing city. So I decided to kind of, you know, take a risk. I moved out there, and then he decided, well, because I arrived a little bit late than we'd planned. And yeah, so he told me basically when I arrived that there wasn't a full-time job for me anymore. So I was just doing Saturday, Sundays. But before I'd moved out to Prague, I did some research on the owner, and he had connections with Slavia. So I thought to myself, well, if you move into a city, Prague's got 4 professional football teams. If you move into a city where, you know, the guy, your contact, has connections with Slavia, then, you know, the potential is maybe in 3-4 years you can work your way, you know, up into that role, or into the club. So I thought, well, it's a really good opportunity. You know, I can move back to Europe, be closer to home. So I decided to do that. And then I arrived, I think it was like October 2017.
As I said, he gave me a couple of hours at the weekend, but it was doing pretty much what I'd already been doing in Taiwan. So I asked him, it was after a month, I think, I said to him, I said, look, I really appreciate the opportunity, but I need more hours. And, the reason that I'm here is that I want to try to make it in professional football. So I said to him, well, can you send an email to your contacts in Slavia and we can try it that way. So in the end, we sent 2 emails. First one they ignored, and the second one they finally got back to me and they invited me in for an interview. So obviously mega excited about that, and like way ahead of the schedule or the plan that I had for myself moving there. And I went down into the academy, and I was awestruck, really. I mean, the facilities compared to the rest of Europe are pretty average, but at that point, just coming from Taiwan where they don't really have proper facilities, and then walking through the academy was just amazing. I walked into the building, and we sat down, and there was like 3-4 coaches were there, like in the youth development phase. And yeah, we started speaking, and as soon as I opened my mouth, they were, like when you walk into an interview or you walk into like a social situation and that you've got the upper hand. It felt a little bit like that, which is weird for a job interview, because I think that they were a little bit intimidated by the language, like the English language. So I felt confident just from that. And then literally after 20-30 minutes, one of the guys who was the most confident, he was the under 13 coach at the time, he said like, I'm interested. He said, I would like to work with you. So let's start together. So I was obviously buzzing, absolutely buzzing at that. Tried to hide it as best I could until I got out. I was so happy with it. And and then we ended up agreeing that I would come in 2 afternoons a week to help in the, with his category with the 13s. And then in the meantime, I was, doing teaching work. I worked in a restaurant. I worked in a charity shop, I think, at one point, just to keep myself ticking over while I was developing that experience and getting my foot in the door. And then, after 6 months, let's say on a voluntary basis, they offered me a part-time contract then. And then it's kind of, this is my 6th or 7th season, I think, with Slavia, and I'm now full-time. So it's been like step by step, basically, that I've built, a couple of seasons part-time and then full-time eventually. So yeah.
Yeah. And it's really interesting, Jonathan, to hear about the interview, because in terms of that, were they more looking to hear about what you were like as a person, or was it to do as well with sort of football and coaching philosophies? And, did you have to show them like a portfolio of your work? How did it work?
No, it was, at that stage, Slavia in the last 5-6 years has improved immensely, really, in terms of, the coaching, in terms of the knowledge, in terms of the footballing culture, in terms of the working environment. It has improved a lot. When I first arrived, I was very fortunate, really, because I don't know what the experience of other, I speak to other British coaches who work in foreign countries, but I think there's a tendency that when you open your mouth and you've got a British accent, people automatically think you know what you're talking about. So I think a little bit of it was a blag, to be honest. It was a fake it till you make it situation. And I remember, the first training session after they'd accepted me, and I walked onto the pitch and they were doing like some, rondo exercise or something. And I was like, how the hell am I going to improve these guys? They're like unreal. The ball didn't leave the area for like, 5 minutes. And I was like, how the hell, what am I going to do here to help? So I decided to shut up, basically, and just watch. So I spent a lot of the first 6 months just watching, listening, talking to the coaches, asking lots of questions. And, it humbled me massively. Like, in Taiwan, I would say I was like a fairly big fish in a small pond, being a full-time coach in the academy I was working at. And then when I came to Slavia, I was like, you realize like how much you have to learn, like how, your level compared to the real world, let's say the real footballing world. So So yeah, it was, in terms of the interview, it was kind of like they wanted to know about my background. Obviously, I'd sent through my CV, but they just wanted me to go through that, you know, mainly my coaching experience to that date, because it wasn't going to be paid work originally. So of course, it was a hit to nothing for them. You know, if they hire a foreigner, then, you know, for free, then they get 6 months where we can feel each other out. And, you know, so I really enjoyed that because there was no pressure on me for that 6 months. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like, well, we're paying you this salary, what are you giving back in return? It was very much, you know, a bonus. Anything that I added or anything that I was able to contribute was a bonus to them. So, so yeah, it was like a soft landing, I would say. Relatively, and like I said, you know, I opened my mouth, I started speaking, and they were quite intimidated. I think the fact that they have to speak English, and you know, the British accents talking about football. You know, everyone thinks Premier League, everyone thinks, you know, the best. So I think I did leverage that a little bit in the beginning, and then you kind of grow into it after that.
Because I also read, Jonathan, that you're actually the first non-Czech speaker to be appointed, you know, a head coach of a youth team in Czech football. So my next question was going to be, you know, how much of a challenge was that? But as it seems, it was a benefit. And I think probably, although, you know, Slavia Prague are one of the biggest teams in the country, it almost seems that your inclusion has benefited to the club just as much, because I also understand that you're teaching people English as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I was head coach under 12, under 13 for 2 seasons. So 2010 category. That was a huge privilege and an honour for me. You know, it came about very suddenly. Just before the season started, we had like a reshuffle. One of our heads of phase, he had to leave, so they had to shuffle the staff around. And I got a call from my boss, who incidentally, he was the guy who hired me when I first arrived. You know, he was the contact. He was head scout at the time, and then he's become academy director now. So he's still my boss, which is great that the guy who brought me here in the first place is now my boss. So yeah, that was like a massive privilege for me. Big challenge, huge challenge. First time I've ever been head coach, and it's, you know, in professional football, and it's been in a foreign country, foreign language. You know, I remember sitting there in the office after the phone call, and I was like, all right, what next? You know, you accept the position, and then you're like, okay, well, what the hell does that mean now? Because, you know, I wasn't experienced enough. So it was very much a kind of process of feeling it out, and you know, learning on the job. Sometimes positive, sometimes negative, but always learning. And then, in terms of my additional responsibilities, so I think part of my role is called English specialist. So I work with my colleagues, delivering English conversation classes. And then I also proofread documents for the club. So I have a talented colleague who, I think he speaks Chinese, English and Czech. And he translates all documents from Czech into English, and then I proofread them to make sure that they're acceptable and using the correct grammar and make it look good, basically. So that's part of my role. We've got Slavia Museum, which is the only football museum in the country. And I also translated and proofread the English translation for all of our exhibits in the museum as well. So it's really nice walking through the stadium and the museum and seeing your work, you know, directly in front of you. You know, on the outside of the stadium, there's like a hall of fame of Slavia, you know, players, like old players, like Vladimir Šmicer, for example, is on there. And I translated and proofread that. And it's really nice that we have, for example, you know, tourists come to the stadium and they read in English, and knowing that I've played a part in that is really special as well, getting to see that. So I do a bit of English work for the club as well as the coaching.
Class. And you mentioned before, Jonathan, that, you know, Slavia has probably developed quite a lot in the last 5 or 6 years. But obviously, if you looked at the English Premier League, stats and analysis are a huge part of it. Is that a thing in Czech Republic? Is that a big part of the football there as well?
I think it's growing. It's a bit complicated here. You've got a generational gap that's probably bigger than most other places. So I don't know if you know much about the history of Czech Republic, but obviously it's only been just over 30 years since communism, the communist occupation. So. And you can see that, a lot of the adults, so a lot of the coaches, a lot of the teachers, a lot of the parents, they still have a communist, almost like a hangover from communism. So their ideas, their education system, their culture is very different because of that. So it means that some of the guys, especially, guys who are maybe 50, 60 years old, that they were brought up in a completely different time. And now you've got the kids who are coming through our academy, let's say 10 to 17, 18 years old, and they're, kind of like Gen Z in Western countries, exactly the same. Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, they're completely opened up to the rest of the world. So you can imagine like the difference between young coaches and old coaches. You can imagine the difference between old coaches and our academy players. That there's it's very complicated in that respect. So I would say that in terms of like adapting to like data and analysis and, becoming more professional, we still got a lot of work to do. But I'm very confident with this new generation that it's gathering pace, and this process will only quicken and will get better and better. So,
and whilst that's a really important, a lot of the coaches that I speak to now, you're not just developing footballers when they're young, but you're developing human beings as well. How have you found that side of things? Tactics are important, but what's the man management been like as well for you?
I love it. One of the things that I do, because the level of English here is relatively low compared to, for example, Germany on the doorstep, Austria, these kinds of places there, and Poland as well. That they're quite good in terms of their English language, whereas in Czech Republic, the young people, they're able to understand English, and of course, they're exposed to English, as I said, via social media, pop culture. But they're very nervous to use English, especially with native speakers. So when I first go into a new category, or when I first start working with a new player, it's first of all, like the first few months I spend just trying to break down those barriers. So getting them to trust me, getting them to, to build that connection with them before I even start the process of coaching them. So I find as a foreigner and, speaking a language, speaking their second language, then that's really important. Those little soft skills, those little soft moments with the players. I think it's probably the thing that I enjoy the most about the job is that little connection that I have with the players. That, I'm 36, so I'm not ancient as well. So I'm still young enough that I can connect with them and, be a little bit more friendly with them, because, the players I coach now are 16, 17, 18. So it's not like we're hugely apart in terms of our generation. So I really like connecting with the players individually. And as you say, man management these days is probably as important, if not more important than tactical principles and, X's and O's and magnets and, tactics boards and all of that jazz. So I'd say, that's definitely my favorite part of the job. And it makes it really rewarding, because, you have players who you start working with who are maybe a bit intimidated to speak to you in English. And then by the end of that process, so after 2 years of working with 2010, they were delivering their own video analysis sessions in English, which is absolutely amazing for 11, 12-year-olds. The start of the 2 years wouldn't even speak a sentence to me, or were very, very shy. And then at the end of the 2 years, they're working on a professional level, let's say, delivering presentations in English. So I think that was like a big, very, very rewarding for me in that sense.
Yeah. And who are your coaching inspirations, Jonathan? And Are there any managers at the moment in the Czech Republic that you think could go really far in Europe and beyond, and maybe even the Premier League one day?
I think the language barrier makes it complicated, and the culture, the footballing culture, as I said, is very different. I would say that Czech Republic is behind the rest of Western Europe, and it means that it's hard for the coaches here to bridge the gap. You won't really find, in my opinion, it's very difficult for a Czech coach to succeed here and then to go and work in the Premier League, for example. I don't see that happening in the foreseeable future. Although it is improving, as I said. Czechs tend to like staying in Czech Republic. They like safety. They're not particularly ambitious, and I think that that's probably a roadblock for them. But in terms of my idols, I tend to look further afield. So, I watch a lot of Premier League football. I like Guardiola, which I know is quite a beige answer these days. But I think De Zerbi as well, really good what he's done at Brighton. Love his principles and his risk taking. Really love the fact that his Brighton team, they play like an academy team, which I think is great. You'll find a lot of professional men's teams or adult teams, they're very pragmatic, or they become pragmatic because they want the results. Whereas De Zerbi, he's willing for his players to take risks, and I really appreciate that. And I think that's probably a growing trend in modern football, that the managers these days, they're not so, or they don't demand perfection in terms of not making mistakes, that they accept when mistakes happen. A lot of work's gone into the last 5-10 years in the Premier League of developing transitional moments, like attacking defensive transition now is almost accepted. You will lose the ball, you will win the ball, and it's almost embracing the chaos. And I think that that's something that De Zerbi has done really well at Brighton, and he's tapped into that. So yeah, I would say De Zerbi is one of them. I really like Tomas Soucek as well. I know he's not doing very well at the moment at Bayern, but I think that his personality, I really like the fact that he's true to himself. That people criticise him quite a lot. Apparently, he's not the most friendly of people, or the most let's say sociable of people. That he rubs people the wrong way, but he doesn't apologise for that. And I think that as a coach, it's really important to be yourself, and to accept that no one's perfect, but I think that you can only be yourself and be authentic. I think that Tomas Soucek is someone that's always done that. So yeah, Tuchel, De Zerbi, Guardiola, pretty classic stuff, really.
Yeah. And when it comes to Slavia Prague's recent success in Europe, it's really interesting actually to hear you talk about how the Czech Republic maybe isn't as developed. I think it makes Slavia's recent success even more impressive. In the Premier League, we've seen Tomas Soucek, Kufal. It seems like there's a really good culture and development that started at the football club in the last 5 years.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Tomas, some of my colleagues worked with him when he came through the academy. What's really interesting is that he wasn't really fancied in our academy. He wasn't, he was very, let's say, towards the bottom of his age category. Wasn't really a high performer. And he went on loan to various clubs, and, he took the long way round in terms of where he's ended up. What I will say is that I do know him personally. We've spoken, and he's got a great reputation in the club in terms of his personality, in terms of his work ethic, which is what you see obviously now in the Premier League. I think he had one of the best data results in terms of his distance covered, in terms of his sprint meters and stuff. That he works really hard, and he's very much a team player, which a lot of Czech players, actually, that's a characteristic of players in this country. And I think that his personality as well, very down to earth, no arrogance, as I said, selfless, really, and humble. And I think Vlad Sofal as well, he didn't come from our academy, but he spent a few seasons with us, and he's developed that as well, that attitude. What was really interesting for me is that, you see the connection that these players still have with Slavia. So West Ham obviously won the Conference League at Slavia Stadium at Edem last year, and they both of them said that it was great to win it at home. So they still feel like they're Slavia, players, even though they play for West Ham. And I think that that's also like a big indication of how we work here, that it's a family environment, and we're not perfect, but the environment we create is a really positive one for young players to grow and to develop themselves. And we're just hoping that Tomas for us was massive. He's I think it's the record, isn't it? £80 million, something like that. So we always joke, if we can produce a player like that every year, then we would be millionaires. We'd be absolutely rich. We would be maybe a Champions League club every season or whatever. So yeah, that's a challenge for us, is that we've succeeded once or twice, and now can we make that a reality every season? That's what we're aiming for.
Two players that weren't necessarily with the academy but were recruited at a young age by Slavia were Abdelhasima, who plays for Brighton. He's on loan at Rangers, and he's scoring goals in Scotland. And then you've got, I think, Jurasek, who went to Genk. He seemed to have a lot of praise around his name. So it does seem that gradually that the players are still being produced at Slavia.
Yeah, and we had David Jurasek as well. He went to Benfica, another player for big money. We've had Alexander Barr, who came from a Danish club, and also at Benfica as well. So yeah, but I would say, the disappointing thing for us is that they're not from our academy. This is something that we're trying to work on, that our scouting and our data department in the first team is very good. They've had a lot of success in terms of the recruitment, finding players that are perhaps, outside the radar of the big clubs and bringing them in, developing them and selling them for money. That's been our business model, I would say, the last 5-6 years, especially since we qualified for the Champions League. That obviously gave a lot of, increased the profile of the club, that players saw us as a viable opportunity to get into the Champions League. And so, yeah, it's something that we're working on. We've got a player called Matej Jurasek at the moment, and he is from our academy. He started in under 11, under 12, and he's been in the first team. He scored a couple of goals in the Europa League. He scored in the domestic league. Very exciting left-footed winger, very exciting player. So he's been injured for a while now. He's been out of action. So we're hoping that he comes back and that he can pick up. I think he's only 19. So we're excited about him. And yeah, we have a lot of prospects in our academy that we're excited about. We had a player in under 17 who went to Juventus a couple of, I think, last year, 2 years ago, which is disappointing because we wanted him to stay with us. But of course, if you're having teams like Juventus scouting your players in the academy, it means we're doing something right. There was one of our under 15s had a trial with Benfica as well before Christmas. So we're starting to get players noticed in other countries, with other big clubs, let's say, around Europe. So it's definitely a positive step for sure. You can see that the development is definitely there, but we just need to speed up that process. And as I said, we need to produce our own players, really. That's the priority.
How closely does the academy work with the main first team in terms of, that joined up thinking and that philosophy? Is it connected and mirrored, or is it quite separate?
I think that if we're being brutally honest, I think it's something that definitely needs improving. I think all parties are aware of that as well. I don't think that's any secret within the club. I think it's difficult because we've had success very quickly. The current first team staff, they came in 5-6 years ago, and they've won a lot of games. They've been very successful. So the emphasis has been very much on the first team because that's been the success story. When you qualify for the Champions League, we drew, I think, at the San Siro with Inter Milan. We drew with Barcelona at the new camp as well. We had like a really, really positive, we've been to the quarterfinals in the Europa League twice, I think, the last couple of years. We're obviously into the knockout round this year as well in the Europa League. So, you know, we've won the title a couple of times, won the Czech FA Cup last year as well. So it's very difficult because, you know, you're gaining that success and people tend to focus on where that success is happening. And the Czech mentality, I think, maybe again, hangover of communist times, that people focus on immediate success rather than investing in the future and thinking about 5, 10, 20 years' time. They would rather focus on, well, we're in the Champions League next season, or we have X amount of money that we've just generated from selling this player, so let's reinvest it in the first team squad, instead of, you know, maybe investing it in the academy and, you know, working a little bit more long term. But as I said, I think that's part of the culture and part of the history of the country. So it's hard to change that. And we're, you know, I think that the more success we have over a sustained period of time, the more used to, you know, having resources, having money we will be, and then we will start to invest money in the academy. And, you know, already we have a new training facility that's just been given planning permission. So that's going to be, we hope in 3-4 years, we'll have a state-of-the-art facility for the academy. So you can see that it is happening, but it's, you know, it's a step-by-step process.
Yeah. And beyond Slavia, Jonathan, would you say that Czech football has its own defined style? Can you see, you know, teams sort of mirroring each other? You know, obviously in the Premier League over the last decade with Guardiola and Klopp, it's all about, you know, pressing, you know, defending from the front, taking risks, as you say, with De Zerbi. Do you see that in the Czech Republic, that it's got its own unique way of play?
It's one of the hardest parts, you know, working with the under-19s. It's very frustrating for us because so at Slavia, we're obviously, I would say, the strongest. Sparta might have something to say about that, but I would say that we're the strongest academy in terms of our style of play. You know, we dominate the ball in every game that we play, really. Even, you know, we played Las Galints last week, the under-19s, and we dominated the ball, absolutely dominated the ball. You know, we're very possession based, so our players get a lot of time on the ball. They're used to playing against mid block, low block, which is how other teams set up against us, because we are one of the strongest teams. And it means that the other teams are not very adventurous. They don't really mix up their style. Still, a lot of the clubs here, even in the academy, they want to win. They focus on the result and not the process, which is frustrating for us because we're more process driven than results driven, I would say. Our bosses are excellent with that. They don't put pressure. They never put pressure on our results, but rather they focus on how we play. They focus on the development of individual players, and, you know, which is how it should be and how it's done in England, how it's done in Germany and Italy, and, you know, in more developed footballing countries. So, yeah, I would say it's difficult when, you know, you can't exist as an island, that we're trying to do the best and we're trying to be modern in our approach. But the other clubs in Czech Republic, either they don't have the resources to do that, or, you know, they're perhaps, you know, focused a little bit more on results than process. So, yeah, we tend to play a lot of the same kind of games where the other team will sit in a block. We'll try to break the block. They rely on set pieces. They rely on counter attacks. You know, that's the pattern of most of the games that we play. Even against Sparta, to be honest, they do that as well. So it's important for us. We try to get as many international games as possible. So we try to play against strong teams from other countries. So our B team went to Bayern Munich last week to play against Bayern Munich B. They lost that 1-0, but it was a very, very close game. We played FC Nuremberg last week, also the B team. We won that 3-1. So you can see that we're trying our best to give different experiences to the players, but it's hard to do that in a Czech league that's very one-dimensional, or can be one-dimensional. There's not really a lot of creativity in terms of what the coaches do, how they set up their teams. And even in the first team, if you watch a Slavia game, especially at home, it's basically attack versus defense most of the time. And the other teams might get lucky. They'll get a counter attack, or there'll be a deflection, or a set piece, or something like that. But it's usually that we dominate the ball, a little bit like Man City, I would say, in terms of the pattern of the game. Obviously not as good, but we're trying to get to that level. So.
Yeah, and as you've mentioned, you're a Stoke City fan, so you'll be aware of the Championship. And I think at the moment, Championship clubs are giving young managers a chance. Obviously, you've got Schumacher there. Joe Edwards has had an opportunity at Millwall. Looks like that one may be coming to an end. But do you take inspiration from the second tier in England as well? That there's lots of different styles at the moment that are coming through. And do you watch that regularly?
Yeah, I do. As a Stoke fan, I do watch. I tend to watch Stoke games more than anybody else. But yeah, I've been really, really impressed with Steven Schumacher. I know that it's not been a great season for Stoke, and it's tough right now. We're not getting the results that probably we deserve. But in terms of the style of play and in terms of the bravery, as I talked about before, I'm a big fan of coaches that are innovative and brave. I believe in that a lot. That you can't do the same thing as someone else and expect different results. So you have to be innovative. You have to try new approaches. This is, especially in the Premier League, where, your games, and the Championship, where your games are analysed to death. There's no secrets anymore. People will be prepared for you. They'll be ready for you. So if you play a certain way and you get a good result, then the team that you play next week have seen that, and they'll set up to try and stop it. So you constantly need to adjust and tweak and find new ways of getting success. So I really like the fact that Steven Schumacher, that he's tried to implement a style that's perhaps he's not able to do yet because of the personnel that we have, but it's definitely the right way. It's the way that Stoke should be playing, and that's what's really good about the Championship, isn't it? That you've got like Kieran McKenna, for example, Ipswich, that's come along, and I watched Ipswich against Stoke at the start of the season, and I was absolutely blown away with Ipswich. I thought that they completely surprised me, to be honest. Like their intelligence, how they created overloads in the build-up, the style of play that they had, the creativity in the final third, the confidence of the players, the speed of the game, how they moved the ball. It was really, unfortunately, it was against my team, but I had to appreciate the quality that they had. So yeah, you've got like Kieran McKenna, you've got obviously Schumacher, you've got even Daniel Farker at Leeds. He's obviously a little bit more experienced, a little bit older, but the style of play is really good. Progressive football. You've got Wagner as well at Norwich, very similar in terms of his style as well. So I think we're really lucky in England that we've got such a strong second division. Second level, third level is also really good as well, that you get in these lots of opportunities for young upcoming managers, and I think that's something to be really proud of, and I think it's something that's going to help the future of the game in the UK. Especially what they're doing is, I know that Steven Schumacher and Kieran McKenna had playing careers, but they're looking more in general towards academy coaches. And they're starting to promote from within, and which is the model in Germany. They've done that for a while. Red Bull Leipzig, Red Bull Salzburg. That's quite normal in Bayern Munich also. So it's really good that now in England we're starting to have the same philosophy. Promoting, giving opportunities to young academy coaches definitely gives me some kind of hope for the future, for sure.
Yeah. Absolutely. And what are your overall aims, Jonathan? Do you see yourself being a manager on the touchline one day?
Yeah, I'd love to. I would love to. I'm very ambitious as a person. One of my dreams, actually, when I visited the World Cup in 2010, was to work at a World Cup in some capacity. I would love to be a part of a national team setup at a World Cup in the future. I would love to eventually move to England, maybe to coach, or as a manager, why not at Stoke? Stoke City would be amazing. You know, I've been in contact with them. Obviously, I was there a few weeks ago. I went home and I did a day at Stoke, and it was, I mean, it's amazing. It's one of my dreams, childhood dreams, to be involved at Stoke. Yeah, I mean, who knows what the future holds? Even here, you know, there's possibilities. I feel at Slavia and in Czech football, you know, that I can go very far. So, yeah, very ambitious. But I know how football works. I know the higher up the pyramid you get, the harder it becomes. So I'm under no illusions about that. I know, you know, I never had a professional playing career myself, so I know that I have to work twice as hard as others already. So yeah, I'm going into it with my eyes wide open, but I believe in myself. And yeah, I think, you know, if you work hard enough and if you have enough self-belief, then I think these things are possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds like an incredible experience, Jonathan, being at Slavia Prague, and just really appreciate the insight and you taking the time out to chat to us today.
Yeah, no worries. I always love doing these kinds of things, because I think it's really good to reflect on you know what you've done and to speak about these things. I think, you know, coaches, there's a tendency, I think, that we're so knackered, you know, because we're, you know, I'm usually introverted, but you know, as a coach, you have to constantly put yourself out there, and you're constantly tired. And I think a lot of coaches, at the end of the day, they just want to sit in a dark room and, you know, talk to no one and, you know, just switch off. But I really enjoy these moments, like these chances to speak about, you know, what's going on and, you know, how I feel about things. I think the more information you share, the better. I think that's certainly my philosophy anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Wish you the best of luck in Czech Republic as well.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Elliot. Thank you.